Hi everyone, in this video we are going to learn a little bit about the characteristics of stars chart that you can find in your Earth Science reference table. To start, let's just take a look at this chart. This video is only going to review half of the information presented in this chart because it's a lot all at once. So the first thing I want to do is to just look at the title of the chart. It says characteristics of stars. Name in italics refers to the star represented by a circle with a cross through it. So what that tells us is that whenever we see this little circle with a cross through it, that's a specific star, and then the name of the star is next to it. So every black dot on this diagram represents a star that could be found in the universe. There are about 16 stars that are specifically pointed out in this diagram. For example, the star Polaris, which we have learned about in the past, is right here. And the actual point that you want to look at when you look at Polaris is that circle with the cross through the center. Another star on this diagram is our Sun, our solar system's own star. We also have the star Betelgeuse, for example, up here. So again, whenever you look at one of these stars that's labeled on our diagram, you want to look exactly in the center of where the two lines cross as your reference point. So the first characteristic that we are going to look at that we can interpret on this diagram is the life cycle stage of a star. There are four main stars identified, four types of stars identified on this diagram. One of them are the supergiants, the giants, the main sequence stars, and lastly the white dwarfs. So one thing to notice is that I added these colors to help you see where each type of star is, but on the original diagram there is no color to tell you which type of star each individual star is. So you have to become familiar with the diagram, and you start to realize that this area in the top right corner are the supergiants. So for example, Betelgeuse would be a supergiant. Underneath that is this circular cluster of stars, and anything in this general area is a giant. For example, the star Polaris would be considered a giant star. This bubble little area down here, this small group of stars are the white dwarfs, and an example of a white dwarf is Pricon B. The hard part here, though, is the main sequence stars. Remember, main sequence stars are the most common. They're where stars spend most of their lifetime. And the main sequence stars are this grouping of stars that kind of go diagonally across the entire chart. So the whole main sequence is this kind of diagonal squiggly line across the chart, going diagonally across the diagram. In addition to telling you what kind of star it is, these labels also tell you if it's an early stage, intermediate stage, or late stage star. So you'll notice under the title main sequence, it says early stage. So any star in the main sequence is an early stage star. The giants are an intermediate stage of their life. The supergiants are also in the intermediate stage of their life. And lastly, the white dwarfs are in the late stage of their life. A second characteristic that we can look at on this diagram is the surface temperature. Notice surface temperature is labeled on the bottom axis, the x-axis here on our diagram, and the unit of measurement is K for Kelvin. The tricky part about surface temperature is that our axis is actually kind of backwards in a sense, in that the highest number is over on the left side, and the lowest number is over on the right side. That's the most important thing to recognize about surface temperature on this diagram. So the highest temperature is 30,000 Kelvin. this is the highest temperature stars. The hottest stars are more toward the left side of the diagram. The lowest temperature over on the right side is 2000 degrees Kelvin. All right, or 2000 Kelvin. And these are our lower temperature, cooler stars over here. So if we're going to look at a specific star, in order to tell the temperature of that star, we want to find the star and draw a line straight down to try to figure out its temperature. So for example, if I were to look at the star Spica here, it's up in this corner of the diagram. If I find Spica, I can draw a line straight down to figure out its approximate temperature. So for example, Spica lands about halfway in between 20,000 and 30,000. So if I were going to guess, I would say Spica is about 25,000 Kelvin. If I want to compare the temperatures of two stars, I can find them both, try to figure out where they both lie along the surface temperature axis. So for example, let's say I want to compare the star Spica to the star Polaris. Here's the star Polaris. I will again draw a line straight down. And it seems like Polaris is about maybe 5,800 Kelvin. But I do notice that Polaris is definitely closer to the cool end of the diagram, and Spica is definitely closer to the hot end of the diagram. So in this case, to compare these two stars, I could say Spica is hotter than Polaris. Let's go ahead and look at the last characteristic that we're going to look at today on the diagram, and that's color. So you might have noticed that color is listed along underneath the surface temperature. And so to find the color of a star, it's kind of the same thing you do to find the surface temperature. Find a star. Let's look at Spica again up here. Draw a line straight down, and basically wherever that line lands is the color of the star. Here we colored in the chart for you so you can get a good idea of where the range for the different colors lie. One thing to note is look at the surface temperature and the colors and how they line up. Again, remember the highest surface temperature, these are the hottest stars on the left side of the diagram, and the coolest stars are over here on the right side of the diagram. One thing to notice is that the hottest stars are actually blue and the coolest stars are red in color. This is important to notice because it's a little bit, it's kind of the opposite of what we normally think. We usually associate the color red with something hot and blue with something cold. But in this case, when we actually talk about real temperature and color and how color appears with temperature, blue stars are the hottest and red stars are the coolest. Okay, you can kind of think of a bonfire that's been burning for a very long time. After a few hours, the fire starts to appear kind of blue. There are some really, really hot portions of the fire, and those start to look blue. You don't have to memorize this, though, because you can always look back at your diagram and match the highest surface temperature to the color blue and the lowest surface temperature to the color red.